I'd love to kick it off by just having each of you introduce yourselves briefly. The title of this panel is Built to Last, Creating Long-Term Value in Crypto. So that's going to be the theme of the next couple of minutes. If each of you, maybe starting with you, Marc, could just introduce yourself and then kind of state what is the core mission of your project? What is the value that you're trying to create for the ecosystem?
Definitely. JM everyone, Marc, director at the Peace Data Association, one of the big contributors to the Pyth network, which is a blockchain oracle, mostly focused to serve DeFi builders, DeFi apps to build the future of finance on chain. And so, first, where to build value, within our own protocol, within our own network. The whole idea, or how I pitch it to my parents, is Spotify for financial data. Because still, in crypto, it's very, everything's free overall, and we need a better data distribution model. So we're focused on that, and more broadly, just enable, deliver a great product so that Helix on Injective can be a banger per DEX and enable trading on chain.
Yeah, I'm the VP of Technology at Solana Foundation. So Solana is laser focused on syncing the world's state as fast as the speed of light will allow. One of the motivating examples is something like if you're going to make a decentralized NASDAQ where it's not a singular location in New York, you want information symmetry between South Korea and Japan and South Africa and Europe. You can't have it in any one location. You need to be able to, what protocol describes that? And that's really what Solana Foundation is going for. To get there, it's a lot of technologies. It's the core protocol itself. It's the validators being able to run efficient businesses all around the world. And you need the application layer and the DeFi layer, and all of that. I help teams that facilitate. The foundation itself is the facilitative entity. We have DevRel, we have engineers that help with that. We help with our core engineering processes. So there's about 15 organizations that commit to the core protocol. So we help facilitate that as well. It's really like a kind of a unification effort there.
Jim Robinson, co-founder of the Wormhole Foundation, one of the two core contributors to Wormhole. For those of you who aren't familiar, Wormhole is an interoperability protocol. I think we really like our buzzwords in this space, and interoperability is kind of a loaded term, but we actually just stole that from previous industries, right? So the concept is just allowing systems that don't talk to each other. They may have different protocols, speak quite literally different languages, if you will, and you're able to make them communicate. I think a good example is Swift. Banking systems are kind of like these their own insular systems, and there's this common way in which they communicate. For those of you in the US, healthcare systems, patient data is very siloed, and there's systems that kind of help that sharing across different hospitals, et cetera. So Wormhole takes that and applies it to blockchains. So we've effectively built a communication layer between 40 blockchains today, connecting Solana, Injective as well. And once you have that kind of base level connectivity, you can build a lot of applications on top of that. Most people are familiar with what is called a bridge. So sending an asset back and forth between chains, but you can also do a lot of other things like send instructions, et cetera, which we can probably get into a little bit more here in a bit.
Yeah, hey guys, Eric Chen, co-founder and CEO of Injective Labs. So I feel like most people have been blasted with Injective as a blockchain built for finance, but I'll think of a better tagline. You can call Injective to be an open, smart finance ecosystem.
Awesome. So my next question, this is maybe just kind of a short one, but in general, yourselves with your teams, are you building right now for mass adoption, or do you feel like you're building to solve issues and problems within the ecosystem that is already here?
I think it's going to be a mix of the two. Most here are at the infra layer. And while we want and need actual use case, you cannot have, like, even if you have the best idea, the best product, if the infra doesn't follow, it'll just break. And I mean, we've seen a year ago maybe, whenever they had the big launches on Solana, like so many people float at the same time, and the like base layer struggles a bit. Things get better over time, so it's very like we still need to be very, I think, focused on the like actual scalability, like be able to sustain like 1 million interactions at the same time. And at some point it will be 1 million interactions all the time. So I think like product-wise we'll find ways to get 1 million people, but we can't even, I think, sustain 1 billion people today.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think we have the long-term vision, which shows exactly where we want to go. There's a pretty well-defined thing that we want to get to that is very reasonable. But with even with something like a platform that has pretty known parameters, you want to do 1 million TPS, you want to have this latency and stuff like that, you still have to understand what's actually going to grab the attention of the builders and the users on top and help iterate there. I don't know of a single product that just released and it's like, oh, yep, this is just a billion person app. Like there was heavily iteration on almost all of them, either pivots or, I mean, even think of the most popular applications in the world right now. They're almost all started off as one thing and then like iterated to be something like quite a bit different than they started off with. So yeah, I think that's really where we are right now, is just constantly improving. Like the Solana today is astronomically better than the Solana a year ago, and that's not even considering FireDancer, which had built its first blocks on testnet today. So yeah, great stuff. Yeah, and so but you have to like have that long-term vision, but like you iterate in a way that you are not departing too far from the long-term vision, but still meeting a user man today. Because if you ever leave users and you're just completely departed from that, you're kind of dead in the water anyway.
Congrats on FireDancer, by the way. I always think of that meme of like people dancing in the room, and there was, for a while, it was like, they don't even know about FireDancer, which just always makes me laugh. I don't know if folks remember, but like there was a time where multi-chain was definitely like not the general consensus in the space, right? It was like, there was a time, maybe some people, yeah. Like I think like, yeah, there was a strong cohort that believed like maybe one chain one chain could handle a lot of it. And I remember with Wormhole in particular, it was definitely a bet at the time. It wasn't like there were going to be all of these different like settlement layers, et cetera, that would need connecting. So I think like for us, I almost view us sometimes as like a network of networks. Like you have your like Ethereum L2 like networking that's needed there. You have Cosmos, IBC World. You have Polkadot app chains communicating with XCM. You have Solana. You have all these different chains, and they have their own kind of like networking, and then we are almost like a highway between those. So I think we've always kind of had the big vision of connecting all of these systems, but what you need, and what I think like was just said right now, is like focus on the short-term wins as well. Even within our company, we always talk about like 1% better every day. Like in order to achieve these big goals, you have to hit the small ones, and sometimes that's like focusing specifically on what the applications are today, what the narratives are today, and kind of building short-term to achieve the long-term.
Yeah, I think for us it's a very classic case of like you can't take over the entire Roman Empire unless you take over the villages around you. So there's a lot of very fundamental, very basic kind of like infrastructure or like bottlenecks that we as an industry have to address and have to excel at before we can easily and exponentially welcome like the mass adoption in a general like public. And obviously you can do this in parallel. It's just that there is a dependency relationship between them.
I am kind of curious your take on like what changed from the like single blockchain narrative to like now everybody like the realization, because what I'm seeing is maybe the realization that block demand is going to be essentially infinite. Like when you have such liquid markets across any type of tokenized asset class, it's not just like a NASDAQ constrained 9 to 5 or that's very limited in what people can even put there. When you have all markets all together, there's going to be infinite arbitrage, infinite like market setting and stuff. So there's basically just a recognition now in that future where everything is price discovered, that basically there's going to be infinite demand.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're agreeing here, right? Yeah,
we totally agree.
yeah.
I'm just
I
curious,
think
like, your
what
take on
changed, honestly, what changed is the Ethereum narrative. If I'm being entirely honest, like the people that believe, like at least at the time when we originally launched Wormhole connecting Ethereum and Solana, at the time it was specifically that like the world would be built on Ethereum.
Like they're sharding. That was when
Yes,
everybody just
yes,
agreed they would
yes.
just be able to add infinite shards, and Ethereum is like.
Yes, I guess I should say one settlement layer, but
Right,
you could say that that's like multi-chain in some sense. Yes.
Well, that actually brought like a very interesting point because for like logically or like fundamentally, especially this is just like hindsight bias. A multi-chain environment is guaranteed given the limitations of like a shared mutable ledger. So this means that like back then like like a monolithic one chain rule them all type of thesis is based on top of like the discretized notion of like what decentralization is. It's like you're either decentralized or you're not, right? So once you establish that like there is going to be a single operator model for layer 2, and then there is going to be like a fully decentralized like a base layer. You kind of evolve from that, like assuming that the customer base or like the user base is going to kind of hard snap towards a discrete series of like step-by-step decentralization. Whereas the current landscape is very clearly like it's no longer discretized. It's very much of a like broad spectrum, right? And you have kind of like these different types of like application focused. It has a lot more fidelity. It has a lot more like dimensions when it comes to the anatomy of like a blockchain. Where basically the multi-chain thesis played out. And yeah, like obviously like decentralization isn't like a discrete series.
Yeah, I think those are some really interesting points. And to your point, Matt, of like what changed with the Ethereum narrative, I'd love to kind of pop that bubble a bit and like go even broader. My background is PR and media communication, so I spent the last couple of years basically trying to land crypto stories in more mainstream press, right? The narratives have changed so much from what people used to care about to how we're sort of pitching it now. In all of your opinions, like what do you think is the most important kind of value-driven story that people outside of crypto really should be caring about? Like how has that changed from a couple of years ago? And where are we now? And kind of what is the one, narrative, if we all could, share it, what is that narrative?
I'd love to focus on the, let's say, trading world part. Like a few years ago, you had the whole GME Roaring Kitty scandal, let's say. I think, like whether it will be on Solana, on a permission chain, like the whole trading world happening on some kind of chain, public or verifiable, is at least in the, let's say, the day trader crowd, the non-professional financial player. I think it's a very interesting and impactful proposal. Like no more, the dark pools, the bad dark pools, etc. So I think just through the use case, through this transparency, specific for trading, for financial products, I think it's very powerful. But we had second wave of GME a couple months ago. It will keep going, and at one point, I think one of my hot bets is that we'll have a BTC, like ETF issuer, starting doing everything on chain, trading on chain.
That'd be cool.
I think at the core of it, there's no other technology that I know of that I've seen that can really have digital assets owned by individuals. They're all brokered either through Facebook or even photos that you have on your phone, and you're on your phone, but you actually don't own the digital things there. You don't own your digital stocks or your digital money. Those are all brokered through something else. The only way that you actually own anything digital is through a blockchain. I have the keys that fully own and no one else can move them, and then the blockchain is an aggregation of the agreement that whatever happens. So functionally, what that allows for, from a user perspective, is there's just any number of applications that I can choose which ones to use for what purpose with a variety of assets. It's not just like Apple Wallet that I can kind of move in, or Google Wallet that I can move in across different websites. I have whatever assets I have and whatever applications decides to serve on them. Now I have just basically instead of 50 project managers at Google describing what can happen with the world's map data. Like the entirety of basically all the world's map data lives owned by Google. If you could put that on more open systems, then any number of entrepreneurs can make some service that users can capture and love or whatever for whatever reason. And I think that's the value prop. So yes, there's frictions today, and we have to solve a lot of problems to get there. But over time, like you can see the glimmers now. Think about how hard it is for even like the New York Times to compete with Twitter. It's because infinite number of people trying to find some interesting nugget of information is actually even amateurs tends to be more like a better serving the audience than even like this really functioning like news organization. And I think that is just going to get more and more powerful as the blockchain space matures. You see it a little bit with meme coins today. No individual person was like, hey, let's make a meme coin economy. Like a bunch of independent people were just like, yeah, this would be fun, this would be fun, this would be fun. So now there's like 20 dexes and 4 different launch pads and a bunch of different like tools, and none of them agreed with each other, but they're all working on the same assets. And I think that's like the glimmer that the consumers doesn't necessarily need to know. The back end doesn't need to know anything. They just know that they can do their little fun thing, whatever that is.
Yeah, I agree a lot with that. The only thing maybe I would add is I think there's this like this thing that happens in the industry where there's almost like this need to prove that everything can live on chain. And I definitely think that at some point like we will get there. But when we think about what has a lot of product market fit today, it's still finance. And when we think about like the finance industry in general, it's quite massive. That TAM alone should be extremely exciting for like if we can bring a large portion of that on chain, to me that's a win. And there's like tons and tons of opportunity still left within that industry. I think we're seeing interesting stuff happening on a bunch of different chains. Obviously meme coins. I think we're seeing like new social applications like Friend Tech, Fantasy Top on Blast, and there's still frictions there as well. And that kind of that's helping the narrative of like everything kind of coming on chain. But I think the one thing that I still think is interesting and we should be more proud of is like the progress we're making with DeFi or just finance in general, and making more of an open system there.
Yeah, I think honestly, like the strongest utility currently which is like financial applications, is honestly kind of happened by chance, given the state and landscape of like the TradFi like ecosystem, because the most interesting part about like typically for like any type of like consumer to corporation interaction is that you're kind of entering this contract, right? The only choice you have is this corporation versus the other corporation, or the product ecosystem, or whatever like structure that they have. And if you use that as kind of like a like bottom like axiom basically to build up like a competitive environment, it means that those corporations are going to initially be almost like competitive. They're just going to be building like very similar shit, or like do micro innovations here and there, and then over time they get like greedy and selfish with like the customer base they amass. They try to figure out like how to retain, how to like keep them in, and what you end up is the current landscape of like corporation, where like without like government to like interfere with like anti-competitive behaviors, they're just going to try to snatch everything, right? It's like Apple's like closed ecosystem, etc. But the very interesting thing about like blockchain, or like all those type of like decentralized ecosystem, is that it's kind of like grounded, or I guess kind of started off with the fact that this is an open ecosystem. It has adjacency of access. It has like full like state kind of like presence of like the entire contract, of the entire kind of like ecosystem. And this means that like you are forced to be open, whether you like it or not. People have all the possible interface, universally, no matter how much you try to gatekeep it. And obviously, the reason why finance is such a good fit is that it is kind of a chaos, in the sense that it's national, like geographically like fenced. It's like socioeconomically fenced, and also more importantly, everything you do has a cost, and it's very palpable to user end. Whereas like generally, like for any type of software-based businesses, like they're just gonna gaslight you into thinking that it's freemium or whatever. So I think this is why like the current state of things, like financial utility is probably the best possible starting point for like the entire industry.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds like there's some consensus there amongst most of you. So one thing I really want to ask and kind of get each of your opinions on, as industry leaders who have been in this space for a long time, made significant strides with your projects. When I speak to teams, we're also in a builder house, so lots of builders are here. Welcome, everybody. I ask people all the time, what is your revenue model? And I get crazy answers across the board. Sometimes it's very clear. If it's a DeFi project or something, sometimes someone is able to give me an answer that makes total sense, and I see how it's sustainable. Other times, people will say, I don't know, let me get back to you on that. And that's always an interesting answer to receive as well. So my question is, maybe we're still in the Wild West where there's a lot of experiments going on. We saw meme coins take off this year. That was pretty exciting to see. When someone doesn't have a PMF yet, and they're still kind of experimenting, and they maybe don't have a revenue model, but they have some amount of runway, maybe it's a DAO that has a treasury, and they held Sol or ETH early, so they have some runway. Does it really matter if they don't have a PMF yet, if we haven't reached mass adoption? Like, are these next 5 years just meant for crazy experiments? Or when you're advising teams and builders, are you urging them more towards, sustainable revenue models? Like, what is this balance of real products and companies and revenue models versus wild experiments if you have the runway to do it?
I don't know. Let me get back to you. I definitely think it's
revenue.
I'll speak maybe to broadly and then specifically how we think about it. I think it's based on category. I think, for instance, if you're certain applications, maybe even financial applications, the model is maybe much more clear. How you would take fees, how you share fees, et cetera. I think maybe at the blockchain, they could probably speak better to this than I can, but maybe at the blockchain level, it's a little bit more clear as well. I think there are a few things that make it more difficult. Number one, I think regulatory clarity makes things difficult, and for instance, how do you share fees? Can you share fees? That I think is poses a challenge in general. But I think when it comes to maybe the category of interoperability, I think that you could say hey, you can, if you have product market fit or you get to product market fit, just slap a fee on it. The way we think about it in particular is network effects. Once you do have some semblance of product market fit, network effects are really powerful. And if you do have capital or runway and you have a longer term vision, establishing as much network effects as you can, not unlike maybe an Uber mindset, if you will. Because once you kind of have those network effects, then you're able to extract value in a more meaningful way. So maybe to give a specific example, today, Wormhole's connected to 40 chains. We don't charge chains for connections. That's not something we do. We don't charge fees for messages going cross-chain. And we do get the questions all the time of where are you guys going to make money, et cetera. And there's a number of different ways you can do that. But one example could be simply, hey, if a chain wants to connect to the network, we're going to charge them. That's definitely something we could do. But that being said, if we think there's going to be quite a bit more chains, maybe we want to connect to more, build up the network effects, and then it becomes even more valuable, right? If you're an L1, you are on an island. You're not connected to any liquidity, any users. So the first thing this L1 potentially would want is hey, we need a connection to Wormhole. It's highly valuable because without that, we're not going to have connection to liquidity and users. So you could make the argument we could charge today. We don't. And then there's messages, right? For the mental model for something like interoperability is pretty similar to a blockchain. Your blockchain really only has value if there's meaningful applications being built on top of it. So if we're charging for messaging, sending data back and forth between chains, that is another barrier to entry to bringing builders on. And making sure that there's meaningful applications being built on top of Wormhole. So I would say it's very much so category based, but I would say for interoperability in particular, we've thought a good bit about this, and there's definitely the memes of are you making revenue? What's going on? It's almost like the Uber meme in a way. But I think for our space, we have a good bit of conviction of continuing to establish the Wormhole rails, if you will, as some of the strongest and the most broad in the industry, and then thinking about that after the fact.
I think we have the same stance at the Pyth network. The idea is so pretty much how how the network collects fees. Whenever someone does a price update, requests a price on chain, he has to pay a fee. For now, it's one way or one LAMP port on Solana for all price feeds, all requests. So it's like not zero, but tending to zero. I think today there is in between 5 to 10 million price deliveries, so about 10 million revenue generation event, but collecting dust overall. And the goal is a bit the same. Ultra growth, reach 100 million, 500 million price updates, and then you just bump it up a bit, almost unnoticeable, and it's actually millions and millions per day. So you don't need PM, you can wait PMF, and fully agree with Robinson here. But I think it's very important that from day one, your protocol is able to generate fees on chain. One thing we see, I think, still too much is off-chain deals, like OG Web2 dealings, which I don't think, I didn't join crypto and DeFi to just sign business contract, legal contracts. So for builders, just build it on chain day one.
Well, for us, it's pretty easy. We're a nonprofit, and I say it very seriously. We have a treasury, so that's our, and we're supposed to get smaller over time. As the Solana ecosystem gets more and more powerful, quite literally, we have less of a purpose. So that's just by design. That's the way it goes. But it is a good question overall, because one, there are different platforms, notably like single sequencer L2s, that is not the case. They are revenue generating, a lot of revenue generating in some cases, which is kind of a weird market because projects, it's hard for them to know the distinction. Everything is very noisy. There's a lot of information out there, and they don't understand if they get a grant from some dApp chain versus considering Solana, like how there's usually they have the single sequencer or whatever the dApp chains have a very clear profit and loss and a profit. This is how you make profit, whereas we don't. And Solana tries to be as close to the price of hardware as possible and least extractive. And those are just fundamentally different things that can happen when you have this competitive environment for attracting users versus a business that's trying to make a platform extractive play. And so it's something that is nuanced to communicate to builders. But to be more generally, I think there is a case to be made that when you're minting tokens and you have potential for airdrops and kind of incentivization schemes, that can be very powerful user acquisition. User acquisition is just going to cost money. I don't think it's fundamentally wrong. I think that you should be laser focused on what am I getting? Am I just getting somebody who's going to farm? If they're just farming, that's probably bad. They're just going to leave or just take money from you at worst. What you really need to be looking for is lowering the barriers to some common activity that's part of your normal loop anyway. And put in gaps where you're not necessarily incentivizing some part of your application that you think is your core value prop. And if people don't start doing that, that's an alarm. You should be, maybe pause your incentive program until you can recapture those loops that you think should be the sticky loops that aren't incentivized at all. So that's what I would be playing around with. Sure, use some funds for user acquisition, but make sure the fundamental value that you're trying to add to your users is being utilized by the users.
Just one quick thing I think you said is that's really interesting in this space is running a company and making yourself less relevant over time. It's very counterintuitive. Being a foundation, you want the actual protocol to be as autonomous as possible. This comes with DAOs among other things, and so talking to your team and knowing that maybe over time that even shrinks, you become less relevant. But that's the goal. I just think it's a funny thing in the industry, and people don't think about it that often.
Yeah, people are surprised. Solana Foundation is only 60 people, and we've actually we have a lot of turnover, but not regrettable turnover. A lot of people, there's a very defined path of coming into Solana for a year, 2 years, and then going out and then joining an ecosystem company or starting an ecosystem company. That's a very, very healthy way that the foundation works. We'll never get too large.
Yeah, I forgot who said this, and I think this is 3 years ago, 4 years ago, where they were saying this industry is so disruptive, where it transcends beyond the common knowledge of revenue, profit, or product market fit and stuff like that. It's about a network, and I'm so glad we're past that. I mean, like the simplest way to put it, right? Like it's pretty much the notion of like gross profit or like gross revenue, right? Like how much people are paying, going to pay for whatever they're trying to get, and the unit cost for doing so, and everything else is kind of BS. So this means that like now you can totally offer this product for free, but if let's say you're running in like a negative type of like operating income, or like negative like unit cost, it means that like basically you're paying for people to use your stuff for like some kind of like vanity stats, right? And then like if you test the water, you start figure out different ways where like people have to value the utility of your product or protocol offering by paying. You also kind of get like a sense of like true PMF. It's really that simple.
All right, so we only have a couple minutes left, so this will be my last question for this panel. And maybe we'll start with you this time, Eric, and kind of go down. But when you're meeting new teams, like let's say these projects are 18 months or less old, like these are fresh projects in the space, where do you see the most waste? Like where are people wasting kind of money and resources? And what is kind of the best advice you can give to these founders and operators for them to really consider creating long-term value, just from your perspectives as being in the space for a couple of years?
Well, I would first ask, like, are you sure? But in all seriousness, I think a lot of time is wasted on kind of doing way too early of marketing prep, BD prep, or different types of like growth prep. Because like once you like overly like incorporate those type of elements way too early on in your product iteration cycle, you kind of start to think it's like, oh, like this is up to BD power, or like this is up to like marketing power, or like you can get away with the lack of fundamental utility because this and that like got a lot of traction by having good marketing, right? Now that may be true, and if you're like a time horizon for your company project or protocol or ecosystem is like the matter of 4 months post launch, like sure, like go get it, king. But like if you ever like wanted like to do this like seriously in the long term, like at the end of the day, like the deck comes calling when you kind of like rely on some like external like metric to kind of push or like illogically like elevate your product utility before you get to answer a true question, which is what is a true like differentiating value prop or like utility point.
Snaps.
Yeah, maybe I'll oversimplify this a little bit. I tend to think about like the core components you need at the very beginning. I agree with what majority of what Eric said, but I feel like a lot of it is like you need a product that you want to come to life, a vision. So you need the tech side, and then I think you need a strong go-to-market. But the other functions in the middle, like hiring, like excessively hiring, I think is very dangerous, especially in a bull market. You're very tempted to do that because there's just this like innate sense of euphoria and the market's doing well and sky's the limit. And so overhiring, I definitely think is a thing, and it's something that we're super cautious of as well. But I tend to think in very much so like simple dinner on the table terms, like, okay, what are the kind of top 3 priorities? And with the team all the time, I'm always like about like, what are your top 3 things? What are your top 3 things? What are the top 3 things we're focused on at any given time? And then like both on the growth side and on the technical side. And keeping it as like stupid simple as possible, especially at the beginning, will continue to like turn you back to your roots of like not trying to like think you need to show up in a big way at a conference too soon, or you need to hire a researcher, right? Like you probably don't need to hire a researcher yet. You don't need maybe an HR person, or your HR person could probably span across a bunch of different functions. So I think like being slim with resources, keeping it stupid simple, focusing on 3 priorities, like always coming back to the boring simple stuff has done well for us.
I'm not gonna lie, I kind of assume like early days you kind of don't have the money to even entertain the idea, but
this is crypto.
Different days.
Also.
Yeah, times have changed.
I saw an 80 million seed round.
Yeah, exactly. What's a seed round
God.
anymore? We don't even have employees yet. We have advisors, and we've raised 80, 50 million. I think I'll go like something a little bit tangential to what they said. I think with blockchain, because you have these highly financial, largely immutable, or hard to change, very high risk smart contracts at the base layer, that the temptation can be, if you look at like the spectrum of done when you release from like 0 to 10, I think a lot of blockchain projects kind of go to 11, which is just a recipe for failure if you're actually trying to get something that captures a user. So oftentimes what you see is people just release a token and say that there's an application that will come later, and then the application basically never ships because they're just trying to get to that 11, and of course that's not ever really going to happen, or when they do ship, it just doesn't meet the consumer demand in any real fashion. So in classic like Web2 land, there's always tricks people play. They'll do things like host an ad on Google or Facebook that just kind of says what product, and they just see how many clicks they get through it. There's no application on the back end. It just sees what would have some resonance with users. And that's like the simplest example, but people do that within their application all the time. They put like some signals and they try to get some learning on what would appeal to your user and heavily iterate over time. And I think that is largely not very existent in crypto. And ironically, like this whole point system thing that's arisen, largely due to like regulatory concerns, is actually helping out, I think, immensely, because you're not pre-minting a token. You have to have a product that you earn points off of. So it actually is enforcing these better product strategies. And I think that's actually helped out the Solana ecosystem incredibly. That's basically what has happened in the last year, is that there hasn't been as many token releases at the beginning. There's been product releases that have points attached to them, and the products are able to iterate much faster in that sense. So yeah, just being really, really iterative and really like product thinking, I think, is like the most important thing all the time. And how you release and describe that is like part of that release go-to-market.
I very much agree with Matthew and Robinson. You need to understaff by a lot and just empower people to do as much as possible. And being early, you'll have this whole like equity via tokens, let's say. So understaff, get committed people, focus on a few things, and focus on products. Token, you should not think about token. Too many times it's like, project gets launched, oh, I need an MM, I need to get listed here at some point. Just think product. It's way easier to find a reason for the token, ideally a value accrual mechanism. So just understaff with great people, committed, and ship stuff. And after, if you do that, you'll be successful.
A lot of really good tips in here, lots to think about. Thank you so much to Eric and the Injective team for having all of us. And Robinson, Matt, Mark, thank you so much for being here. I think I can collectively say we're all going to look forward to watching your projects continue to build and kind of have that legacy status in the space. So that's a wrap on this panel. Thank you so much to everyone for being here.